Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's Ukrainian talk show on Pod TV. My name is Sasha Star, and today's guests are Dr. Jonathan Lockwood. Welcome to the show, Jonathan.
Thank you, Sasha. Glad to be here as always.
Great to have you as always. And Ivan Kucherenko from Kyiv, Ukraine. Welcome to the show, Ivan.
Hello, Sasha. Hello, Jonathan. Glad to be here as well.
Yeah, great to have you, Ivan. And let's start with the movie that we are going to see about its operation in Kursk region. Right?
Yeah, it's a really great movie with a lot of information. So I think we will discuss it after we watch this movie. So let's start with it.
Thank you.
There's a concept of flipping the game. It happens pretty often, but playing off the chessboard is a rare phenomenon. The Ukrainian operation in Kursk seems to be just that, an off-the-board game. But why Kursk? What Putin's terrifying secret has been revealed by this Ukrainian attack, and what changes has the Kursk operation already brought to the war? Let's get to the bottom of it. The choice to attack the Kursk region has led to a lot of criticism, saying that Ukraine is dispersing its already limited forces and that there are many places on the front line that critically need more Ukrainian soldiers. Fair enough, but Ukraine is already gaining a lot from this unexpected operation. The attack has revealed Putin's terrible secret. The Russian army is unable to ensure the inviolability of its territory and safety of its citizens, being much more vulnerable than it had previously seemed. According to Donald Jensen, U.S. Institute of Peace, the Ukrainians have skillfully chosen and exploited a weakness in the Russian deployment. Based on this vision, the Ukrainian army struck the flank of the Russian forces, creating a numerical advantage. What? A numerical advantage? How is this possible? The head of the Bundeswehr Situation Center in Ukraine, Major General Christian Freuding, estimated that Ukraine had used 4 brigades of 4,000 to 6,000 soldiers in the offensive, supported by 2,000 to 4,000 soldiers providing logistics and air defense. In total, this is up to 10,000 combatants. This is a very limited contingent, and this is probably all that the Ukrainian command had at its disposal. However, according to Ukrainian officers who took part in the operation, approximately the same number of troops were on the Russian side. And this is shocking. Ukraine's border with the Kursk region is 152 miles long. If this border were a front line, the Russians would have to keep a 120,000 strong force grouping there, approximately 800 soldiers for every mile. But no, 10,000 Russians were stretched over a 152-mile segment, and the Ukrainians chose to attack a limited area up to 50 miles wide. Thus, with limited resources, the Ukrainians still created a numerical advantage and broke the defense. But don't get us wrong, it wasn't a cakewalk as some media outlets report. Because since the summer of 2022, the Russians have spent more than $250 million to fortify these positions, $1.6 million for every mile. OSINT analyst Bradley Afric, who used satellite imagery to map Russian fortifications, noted 2 lines of defense in Kursk Oblast. Based on the map, this is what it looks like. This multi-component defense line consists of a large anti-tank ditch that cannot be crossed by armored vehicles. Then, there is a line of anti-tank bulwarks called Dragon's Teeth in 3 to 5 rows. Between them are minefields. Only after that is the line of entrenchments, trenches, pillboxes, and fortified checkpoints with underground communications. By the way, some positions have underground barracks, a canteen, and a gym. Something like the Surovikin line in southern Ukraine, which Ukrainian forces failed to break through in the summer of 2023. But the training wasn't wasted, because many of those soldiers are now taking part in the Kursk operation. In a few days, they were able to take control of more territory than the Russians had captured in 6 months. How? First, Ukrainian forces carried out mine clearance, breaking through the border and destroying Russian defenses. For this purpose, they used artillery and Ukrainian aviation. Russian air superiority somehow disappeared. Ukrainian planes dropped hundreds of guided bombs on Russian positions, and helicopters circled over Russian positions as if they were at home. It was the first time in 80 years that foreign aircraft had bombed Russian territory. Keeping the initiative, the Russian command felt absolutely comfortable. The Russian army continued its pressure in the Donbas region and in the Kharkiv direction. After all, according to warfare science, having the initiative allows you to determine the place, time, and intensity of combat operations. The Kursk Bulge was not part of their plans in the near future. But on August 6th, the situation changed dramatically. Geolocation data from footage released on August 6th and 7th shows that Ukrainian armored vehicles moved into position along the 38K030 highway, approximately 6 to 7 miles from the international border. Ukrainian forces advanced both northwest and southeast. 2 Russian helicopters, a Mi-28 and a Ka-52, were shot down. The Mi-28 was shot down by an FPV drone. This is the first time in the history of warfare that a helicopter has been shot down in this way. By August 8th, advanced patrols of Ukrainian forces were already present in areas 22 miles from the international border. A week later, a Ukrainian military commandant's office appeared on the occupied territory. It became clear that the operation was successful and it was not just a raid. Although it is still too early to summarize the Kursk operation's results, some are already available. First, the Ukrainians have shown that they are able to conduct maneuver warfare, which the Russians are not. Secondly, the Russian command now has to move reinforcements to defend Kursk and build a new line of defense there. This means we can expect the Russian army's pressure along the main front line, especially in the Kharkiv direction, to ease. It is already known that the 75,000-strong force grouping of Russian troops in the Kharkiv sector has been reduced by 11 battalions, which were redeployed to defend Kursk. In addition, the number of rocket artillery attacks on the Sumy region of Ukraine has already significantly decreased. However, the depth of a breakthrough always has time and distance limits. It depends on the number of troops and equipment involved because the advanced units will be surrounded if the flanks and rear are not protected. The further the Ukrainians go into the depths of Russia, the more difficult their logistics and supplies will be. But even the current depth of advance is already a success. The main thing is that Ukraine has seized the initiative and can now choose the following steps. Either continue to build up troops and push towards Kursk, or hold the positions and try to attack another part of the border. But it is already clear that the Russians will have to build up troops along the entire border, where there is no active fighting. Russia's Kursk, Bryansk, and Belgorod regions share a 720-mile border with Ukraine. To fill it with troops, Putin will have to declare mobilization again, which is a highly undesirable scenario for him. However, an even worse scenario is to leave Russian territory under the control of the Ukrainian army. After all, the Russian authorities have not known such a disgrace in the last 80 years. This brings the political component of this maneuver to the forefront. The longer the Kursk operation lasts, the greater the political consequences for Russia will be. But will the Ukrainian army be able to hold the occupied bridgehead? Justin Crump, a former British Army officer who now heads the risk consulting company Sibylin, says that the Ukrainian forces on the other side of the border will eventually become more vulnerable to Russian attacks. He says that Russia's chances of attacking Ukraine's supply lines and effectively using its air force will increase. In other words, the quiet border will turn into a hot war, which is currently going on in Donbas. But in this scenario, the liberation of a few hundred square miles of Russian territory that remain under the control of the Ukrainian army could take several months. During this time, Ukrainian raiding groups deep in the Russian rear could destroy important energy or logistics facilities. These are very sensitive losses. The Ukrainians are already destroying bridges to protect their flanks and can use captured fortifications left by the Russians. It will not be easy to drive them out of there. The border of the Kursk region is divided by small water obstacles into small sections that could become death sectors for the attackers. This could be a catastrophe for the Russian army, as it was in Bakhmut or Avdiivka, where the Russians lost tens of thousands of soldiers. So, the Ukrainian offensive in the Kursk region of Russia is a bold operation, especially when viewed in the broader context of military history. It is an operation with high risks and a potentially high outcome that could change the course of the game. Military history offers an interesting case of such bold risk-taking. In the fall of 1776, George Washington's Continental Army, fighting for independence from Great Britain, suffered a crushing defeat at the Battle of Long Island. But Washington sent his army south to New Jersey, where it attacked 2 British outposts in Princeton and Trenton. It was an unexpected maneuver. By crossing the frozen Delaware River, Washington surprised the British and ultimately defeated both outposts. The result was not just a tactical defeat for the British. By taking Princeton and Trenton, the Continental Army essentially cut off the British outposts west of its main base in New York. In the same way, the Ukrainian army can cut off a 75,000-strong grouping of Russian troops in the Kharkiv sector if it manages to cut the Kursk-Belgorod highway. So, as General George Patton told his commanders, audacity, audacity, always audacity. Give us a thumbs up if you agree with him, or better yet, share with us in the comments which topic you would like to see in the next video.
Outstanding.
Yeah, fantastic video. Thank you, Ivan. And do you think that this is what we are witnessing now? It's complete turnaround of this war? Ivan, what do you think?
Actually, nobody knows what is behind the Kursk operation. In a recent interview, President Zelensky said that, of course, we can see the obvious goals of the Kursk operation, which were already discussed in media, and we've seen them in this video as well. But besides, there are some hidden goals, and he would prefer not to discuss them right now. And nobody knows what hidden goals beside these operations are, and maybe these goals can make Ukrainian victory to become a little bit closer. Actually, there was another big interview of President Zelensky today, and he said that he has a real plan of for Ukrainian victory, which he is going to introduce within several months to President Biden and to both candidates to presidents of the United States. I don't know what is this what is about this plan, but he said that actually it is in the hands of President of the United States to help Ukraine to get a victory in this war at last. So we will see.
Jonathan, it's a question to you. I've heard the comments on some of the Russian-Ukrainian channels that, number one, Biden, even if he was not warned about this movement of Ukrainians in the Kursk region, but he was informed right after the beginning of operation every 4 or 5 hours or so. That's he himself said so. Okay. Number two, Ukrainians never made it clear to anybody, including Biden, by the way, about the goals of the operation. So Biden is informed about the operation and how it's going every few hours or so, but he has not been informed for almost 3 weeks about the goals of this operation and what it's where it's going. Now, why is it important? In my opinion, it's important that since U.S., including other Western allies, supplying Ukraine with weapons and ammunition, the goals are important to identify which weapons and ammunition are required. Depends on the goal stated. Okay, maybe they cannot state the goal because they want to keep it in secrecy. That's also quite possible, and probably that's all what it is. So then it makes Biden's administration even more difficult. They are obliged to supply something what they're not sure if and when and where needed. Jonathan, how you for yourself
It-
verified?
It's a very clever strategy on the part of the Ukrainians. They're acting like a very good poker player would do in a game of 7-card stud, where you've got first 2 cards down, next 4 up, and the last one down. They are keeping the think of the goals as representing those face cards down, and if they keep them secret, okay, then the U.S. is put in the position of, okay, well, we'll supply you with whatever we can. And basically, the Ukrainians say, just give us the weapons. We will decide how to use them and for what purpose. Thank you. It's our country, not yours, that's being invaded. So,
Uh,
Totally
yeah,
agree with you.
Jonathan, I agree with you. And actually, I've heard the same advices regarding attacking deep into Russian territory using American weapons, especially ATACMS missiles and other missiles provided to Ukraine. And some experts offer Ukraine to do with these attacks the same as Ukraine did with the Kursk operation, just to start attacking the Russian military objects. First of all, airfields, which they're using to bomb Ukrainian civil infrastructure, and then to show results when a lot of Russian aircrafts will be destroyed using ATACMS missiles, and then just ask for more missiles to show even more results. Actually, it's a great investment of American taxpayers because they are paying for defense of United States, and Ukraine is destroying the forces of one of the major threats of the United States, Russia. So
all to American benefit. And I think the Americans, as well as the rest of the NATO allies, have all realized this, that it is in their best interest to give Ukraine what it needs and what it's asking for, so that, see, right now the Ukrainians have successfully thrown the Russians off balance. They are off balance, and by keeping their goals and objectives secret, even from their allies, they're not only keeping the Russians off balance, but they're also giving themselves the freedom of action and security and knowledge that our allies don't know what's coming next. The Russians don't know what's coming next. We have the initiative and the flexibility to choose where to strike next. And if they follow up one successful they've thrown one successful punch, now they can have the freedom to decide, okay, where are we going to throw the next punch? Or are we going to pause and wait? They don't know. Nobody knows. And that's all to Ukraine's benefit.
And actually it plays very well into Biden's plan of plausible
Plausible deniability?
deniability. That's exactly right. So he's gonna say, look, they didn't tell me anything. I was asking them questions. What are your goals? And they didn't tell me anything. What could I do? You see, they're on their own.
I'm just a helpless guy with a few months remaining in my presidency.
That's right.
Give me a break.
And I was asking questions, and they didn't want to talk to me. So what could I do?
Yeah.
So that works pretty well.
Basically, tell the Ukrainians to take it up with the Russians, and the Ukrainians will say, "We're doing that."
What's interesting is that on Russian television channels, there is an outcry. They're almost crying, the commentators there, that look, Ukraine, all NATO is helping, United States is helping, and so on. And we have our own organization, ODKB. I forgot what it's standing for, but there's a few countries like Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Ivan, maybe you know better with some other countries, Kyrgyzia maybe, and Armenia.
Armenia, but they've announced that they will left this organization because it's completely useless.
Yeah, Armenia was very upset that nobody helped with its fight with Azerbaijan. So anyway, so all the Quebec countries, nobody helps Russia, neither with weapons, soldiers, or logistics, or just anything. They just don't help. Even North Korea helps a little bit. China maybe helps. But these countries that they oblige to help because of this organization, its only existence is to help to each other, and they don't. So they are so upset. And some commentators ask, let's start the war against all these countries that are willfully not helping Russia.
There is, Sasha, there is a really simple explanation because in NATO, every member of the NATO and the United States as a major power of NATO is interested in having more and more powerful countries within NATO, and those countries to increase their defense budgets, increase their armed forces, etc. And in ODKB, Russia was not interested for any other country to be powerful, because in the paradigm of Russian Empire, in any of such kind of alliances, maybe only one power, Russia. So the armed forces of all other countries in ODKB, they're extremely weak. For instance, armed forces of Belarus, they are pretty weak, and they are not joining the direct war on the side of Russia only of one reason, because those forces will be eliminated very fast if Belarus will use their forces to attack Ukraine. Ukraine will move our own forces, defeats Belarus forces, capture Minsk, put Lukashenko in jail, at least free people of Belarus from his regime, and then Russia will lost
a huge slice of territory. Yes,
and they're one of their major allies. Soviet Union and now Russia, they were not directly interested in allowing their so-called union countries, their partners, to have major and powerful armed forces. That's why Ukrainian armed forces were step by step destroyed by pro-Russian defense ministers and pro-Russian President Yanukovych to make them extremely weak, because Russia was not interested in Ukraine having a strong armed forces. In no way in reason of their possible future war with the Ukraine and capturing Ukraine territories by power, or annexing Ukraine territories and making them another country satellite like Belarus by soft power, by putting some pro-Russian president and pro-Russian parliament in Ukraine and all this stuff. So it's a simple explanation.
Regarding the Belarus, the Lukashenko is too clever and too practical to have this dance, what he's doing now for a number of years, when he is trying to be friendly with Putin and not upset him, and at the same time he is not starting any actions against Ukraine, because you see, like he most likely he will end up either in Russian jail or in Ukrainian jail. So he is trying to avoid both of them at the same time, and so he has to be very skillful to have this policy. And so far he's successful now for so many years, and he's doing more or less the same. Now the other countries, they are all trying to guard their interests against Russia, because they all understand that if Russia wants at any time, they can take half of Kazakhstan and portions of Uzbekistan and so on, because Russia treats all these countries as its empire, both former and future. So basically they treat it as it's all our territory. Okay, let them be independent for the time being, but sooner or later it will be our territory anyway. So it doesn't really matter. Except one thing, I have a question, Jonathan. When Ukrainian army will take over the Kremlin. The other republics will still be watching it and will not help Russia in.
Not a chance. They'll just say, "You made your bed. You're going to sleep in it."
Yeah, that's most likely will happen. So now the question is, again, since neither we nor Joe Biden understand the goals of Ukrainian operations, so we all have to just guess what's next.
Correct.
So far, all we observing, in my opinion, is that the Ukrainians are there. Um, not it's not a temporary stance for them. I think they're there for a long period of time, several months, if no longer. And they're having fortifications and substantial engineering army troops and firepower and Atacams and F-16s and Storm Shadows not too far from there. So I think this is why Putin decided to ignore it completely, as it doesn't exist. What makes a difference for them? So this is territory, okay, it was controlled by Russians, so-called control. I don't understand what kind of control was there, but okay. And now, so okay, so Ukrainians replaced Russians. So Ukrainians say, okay, Russians, you've done a very good job. Now you can take on vacations. So thank you very much. So now Ukrainians are controlling this territory. So what's the difference to Putin? Okay, so now Ukrainians, okay, then we come back, you say Ukrainians, thank you very much for controlling this territory. Now we are back in control, so back and forth. So Putin is not really making a big deal out of it. He wants to make sure that the population at large will not start worrying about, for the first time in 8 years since Second World War, even part of Russia is occupied by by foreign forces, if so to speak.
They're being part of Russia is being occupied by the country that they were trying to occupy. So
Yes, that's right.
So it's okay. So an equal trade-off. It's also interesting to note in recent reports that Russians are leaving Crimea. They're trying to there's been traffic jams. They're trying to get out of Crimea for fear that the Ukrainians are about to strike and destroy that last remaining the Kerch Bridge. And
that's strange because summer is not over yet. So maybe they
well,
can still stay in some datchas in some place.
they decided to cut their summer vacation short because they don't want to become permanent residents / prisoners in Crimea.
And have a permanent vacation.
Permanent vacation in Crimea. So this is fascinating because the Kursk offensive has not only thrown the Russians off balance, not only are the Ukrainians successfully keeping everyone in the dark about what their next objectives are, but they still have, as I've contended in past programs, they still have that option for throwing that follow-up punch to seal off the Crimea from Russian reinforcement and logistics, isolate the occupation forces that are in Crimea, and basically set the Russians up for the commitment of Ukrainian strategic reserves to launch an offensive into Crimea itself and take the Russian occupiers prisoner and force the surrender of Crimea back to Ukrainian control. That will be a decisive. This one is the Kursk operation is a significant political defeat and military defeat for Russian forces. A follow-up offensive or a follow-up punch that seals off and regains control of the Crimea for Ukraine will be a decisive military defeat. So it's like a 1-2 punch in boxing. They've set them up with a jab. Now they've thrown them off balance. Now they're going to follow up with the follow-up punch that takes the Russian army down and enables the settlement of the Ukrainian war on Ukrainian terms.
Exactly. And when you're talking about second punch, right now there could be several second punches because the Belgorod Oblast is right there, and the
Russians have to guess which one is going to be the one that counts.
And Bryansk, and then you can go south to Rostov. So, I mean, it's a wide open area. And as the Prigozhin showed a year ago, he could go from Rostov to Moscow almost unopposed. And this is, I think it should be a nightmare for Putin if Ukrainians indeed will decide to extend their operation to neighboring oblasts and start controlling more and more territory. It seems to me it's rather strange that Ukrainians were able in a couple of weeks to amass a territory that Russians had to get, like Avdiivka and Pokrovsk. They had to work for several months before they would take this similar amount of territories. So this is really something is wrong there. Something is definitely wrong. Ivan, what do you think?
Yeah, actually, this situation showed that Russia was completely unprepared, and they are so sure in their power, and that Ukraine will not attack them. Though a lot of military experts actually advised last year when Ukraine planned counteroffense to not just to go on those Russian fortifications in Zaporizhia region on so-called Surovikin line, but just to go and make their way through Russian territory, which was completely undefended because all Russian armed forces were in Ukraine. And that time, of course, our Western allies didn't were not so happy about this plan, and that's why Ukraine was forced to attack directly those fortifications and large minefields. But this year we didn't ask for any permission, and just did what actually would be the best from the strategic point, and it showed the result. It showed that Russia was completely undefended, that they had pretty weak forces there, and it showed their reaction, the weak reaction as well. Currently, Ukraine is occupying more than 100 of Russian villages and cities on this territory, and the size of this territory is more than 1,000 miles. It's more than Russia occupied in Kharkiv region during their so-called great offense operation this year. And Ukraine is currently advancing, continue to advance in the Kursk region. I've seen an interview of Ukrainian Commander-in-Chief General Syrsky, and he said that Ukrainian forces are continued to advance in Kursk region. Russians are still not able to stop Ukrainian forces from advancing there, and it's actually for a normal person, for a normal president of a country, when your territory is attacked, you must stop all other kind of offenses and just grab all your forces, put them into that territory, and wipe out the enemy forces from your territory. And but it is not working for Russia. We've seen in the video that they moved some forces from other directions of the battlefield to Kursk, but it didn't help actually, and they're still trying to advance in the east part of Ukraine, putting more and more forces there, just to show everyone that they're not concerned about Russian territory being captured by enemy forces. They just want to complete the goals of their so-called special military operation. It's really weird. It's like a chicken. When you cut a chicken head, it's still running and trying to make to show that it's still alive, but it doesn't have a head. actually. So Russian is now like a chicken without a head. They are still trying to attack on the Donetsk region while their territory is being captured. And first for 80 years, actually, it's been captured using German tanks. Now it was a horror for German politicians that German tanks would again be on Russian territory, but it's happening. So
it's too bad that Germany doesn't have this old 1943-44 tigers and panthers and leopards. It would be quite interesting to see them in Ukraine again.
I mean, the irony is not lost on the Ukrainians, nor is it lost on the Russians. It's like, oh my goodness, they can't believe it. And
you've seen this sorry, Jonathan, just want so you've seen this piece of video when I showed you a fragment from a German TV when two German officers of their Bundeswehr army, they're discussing a Kursk operation, and this is like 80 years.
They're saying just like old times.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Actually, before we finish the program, I would like to remind you that the myth of second strongest army in the world and so on, you have to actually reevaluate all this doctrine, because if you will go in a Russian past, Soviet Union, Russia, I will not go as far as Crimean War in 1854, when Russia was completely destroyed in Sevastopol and so on. Let's start with the 20th century, the Japanese War. So Russian Tsar, he wanted a very quick and decisive battle with a little Japan. They have a little army, they have little men, and we will destroy it in no time. Okay, what is the result? Result is the Russian army, Russian fleet were destroyed, and there was a revolution of 1905. Okay, so then First World War. So the Nicholas II, he was advised to stop mobilization, so there would be no bloodshed. No, let's fight, and so on. Result is a defeat, revolution. Actually, Russia was on the winning side, because Entente and then United States, they were victorious, and they had incredible, difficult peace for Germany. But at the same time, Germany earlier had defeated Russia. Why? Because Bolsheviks said that they give up. They don't want to fight Germans anymore. They want to build a new society, a new country, and so on. Even Second World War, which Russians won, but let's take a look the price of that victory. Jonathan, you know how it worked out.
25 million casualties on the Russian side, and that is a rough, not only a rough guess, but it's a conservative guess. It could well be more when you add in the effects of Stalin's purges before and during and after. I mean, the number of Russian deaths is just or Russian/Soviet style deaths. It's absolutely staggering. Belarusia lost 25% of its population during the Second World War. I mean, that is just absolutely staggering. To put it in America, it dwarfs anything in the American experience, for certain. The closest analogy that we have is the American Civil War, and even that is dwarfed percentage-wise in numbers by what happened in Russia.
So Russia is not learning from its past, because beginning of Second World War, Russia was entirely, the European territory was almost wiped out by German blitzkrieg strategy. And if it wouldn't be for Allied help, especially the United States, Russia wouldn't be able even to win the Battle of Kursk because they needed a lot of trucks to carry artillery shells, to carry the troops, and they just didn't have those. They had
And
horses.
the United States has supplied American Ford trucks. They supplied many Ford trucks, and that
There
was
is
the only,
a
and other than that, all they had were horses and wagons.
That's right.
there is a really nice joke about it. Vladimir Putin is bringing back the soul of Joseph Stalin and the spirit of Joseph Stalin, and ask him, "Dear great leader, just tell me secret how you won this great war." He said, "The answer is quite simple. I've asked the United States for help, and they've sent me equipment and food, and I've put Ukrainians to battle on my side."
Yeah, yeah, I've
Very
heard
good.
that in different interpretations.
He finally came to his senses.
Yeah,
Of course, the Russians, once they advanced through Ukraine, they apparently lost their senses again because the Ukrainians were having nothing of Russian or Soviet occupation, and the Ukrainians resisted, which is not well known in the West, or appreciated. The Ukrainians resisted in a guerrilla movement the occupying Soviet forces from the end of World War II. It was not fully suppressed until about 1954. That's 9 years that the Ukrainians resisted the Russians without outside help.
and by the way, Lithuanians resisted for Soviet Union for almost just as many years, maybe even longer, but it wasn't as powerful resistance as it was in Ukraine, where almost all Western Ukraine actually resisted, and the even population which didn't fight directly the Soviets, but they were helping to hide this freedom fighters, and that was going on actually, almost 10 years. Well, gentlemen, I would like to thank you so much for today's program, and I really hope that by Friday we will have even better news to discuss. Until then,
At the rate things are going, it's almost inevitable that we're going to have more good news by Friday.
absolutely. Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Slava Ukraini.